Hello everyone, B.L. Carter here, affectionately known as Miss B. I hope that you are doing well, your families, children, spouses, moms, dads, friends, and if not, you are working on your puzzle pieces to get well. Reminder that we only have a limited amount of time in this skin, and with the way of the world, time is getting short for all of us. That being the case, you want to be in your best position physically, spiritually, emotionally, while you are here, to enjoy while you are here, and in preparation for your transition. So, today I wanted to talk about supporting the unwell. Those of us who have people around us who are sick in some way. There was a term at one point, taking your loved one to the doctor. And I wanted to talk about that. And quick disclaimer, my personal definition of doctor not only includes those in the white coats at a hospital or clinic, but it also includes the naturopath, the osteopath, the herbalist, your diary from your great-great-grandmother where she wrote down various home remedies and concoctions. Your doctor could very well be your backyard garden. So, let's dive right on into that one. First, I want to say, if you know someone who is ill, don't let them go to the doctor by themselves. We get to doctors, people get to doctors, and they can forget stuff. Anything can occur, and there is no one there to help support, to retain the information, and more often than not, the patient is trying to digest or trying to hear everything the doctor is saying. The patient is not necessarily in a position to digest or comprehend fully what's being said. So it's always a good idea to have another person or two, just for the mere fact that it takes one person to listen, it takes another person to help comprehend, and maybe even a third person, so that you guys can do a check and balance discussion afterwards to make sure you've got it all. That's part of communication. When we are communicating with others, we don't always hear the other person, and so in patient-doctor situations, if you're listening to respond, you will miss some of the things that the doctor's telling you. And so that's a good reason to have someone with you. And that's a good reason for those of you who have someone who is ill to go with them, so that you can be that extra person, that extra set of ears, or that extra set of eyes. If you see someone and you know something's wrong with them in some way, take action, speak up. Don't just sit back and watch the person go through various physiological changes, emotional changes, whatever changes they are, and sit back and leave it to them to deal with it, or leave it to someone else to deal with it. You can't ignore it. It's kind of one of those things, I feel if you know about it, you have a duty to act upon it. And action may not necessarily be handcuffing them and dragging them to someone. And sometimes it could be, depending on who the person is. Action could very well be watching the signs and symptoms, gaining information, doing some research, questioning, and going back to that sick person and saying, hey, look, I've been noticing this, I've been noticing that. Have you had it checked? You haven't? Okay, great. Well, I found this particular provider, this herbalist, or, this particular herb that might be able to relieve you. Do you want to try it? Do you want me to pick you up some? Do you want me to schedule an appointment? Take the initiative and help them. It doesn't take much to do it. It really doesn't. But I promise you, you'll avoid the regret later if you don't act and things go sour with that person. I also look at it, to whom much is given, much is expected, is what we learn. So if you are given the knowledge that this person is ill, either by way of listening to them, by way of watching them, or just by way of something that dropped in your spirit, do you not have a duty to act on it? Are you not expected to act on it? Yes, you are. If you weren't expected to act, then the information wouldn't have come to you. And let me take a little pause break right here and say, for those religious people who like to say, yeah, I prayed for them and you went on about your business, that's not action. And I'll give you a scripture. Faith without works is dead. So just to pray and keep it moving, that's not action. If it's someone that has crossed your path, the action could very well be just look in a book or look up on the internet the particular symptoms that they may have reported or that you saw and share it with them. Then you can say you took action. But just to say, oh, I'm going to add them to the prayer list and keep it moving, to me, that's not action. That's, my favorite term is an excuse to do nothing. What about you being their only hope? Suppose there is no one else who is sharp enough, who's keen enough, or who is able to discern or see what that person is dealing with, or any portion of, or who has eyes to see that something is wrong. If there no one else around them has that ability, for whatever reason, or the capacity at this time, but you do, all the more reason to realize you could very well be their only hope. So you don't get to ignore what you know. And more logistical and practical things could very well be, suppose they don't have transportation. They might be too proud to ask. They might have asked too many other times for other favors or help, and they feel like they were bothered. Elderly people and people with disabilities tend to feel like they are a bother. So you definitely want to avoid that. Offer it. What's wrong with saying, hey, I'll drive you? When was the last time you went to the doctor? I'll drive you. Or, I can't drive you, but I'll pay for your Uber there and back. Or here you go. Here's $50, pay your copay and go. Or, what about, I know you use cayenne pepper and lemon juice for whatever particular illness you might use it for. So I picked you up a fresh bottle of cayenne and some fresh lemons to squeeze to work with your illness. That's action. That is action. Another reason to take your loved one to the doctor, so to speak. Suppose they don't remember all their symptoms. Suppose they are in a position where their health has gotten them to a point where they can't remember everything. Suppose they're an elderly person who, dementia may have set in or whatever other illness. It could be a young person, 5 years old. If they're dealing with some sort of condition that impacts their brain and their memory, then they're not going to remember everything either. So they may not remember that, 2 days last week, they were feeling really, really lightheaded. And when you get to the doctor this week, they're feeling better, so it's not on the forefront of their minds. Yet it was important, and it is important for the provider to know that these are recent symptoms. And if they shared it with you, then you can help share that information with the physician, the provider, the doctor, the herbalist, whomever it is, so that they get a fuller picture of what's going on. Another reason, and I've seen this firsthand in caring people, sometimes our unwell people tend to leave stuff out when they go to providers. And they do it for various reasons. They might be ashamed to say, yes, I have a history of venereal diseases or STDs. Now, it may have been 20 years ago that you had that particular disease, but how many of you all know that once you have a disease, especially some of the STDs, though they are treated and mainstream medical likes to say you've been cured of most of them, the strain still remains in your body, some version of it, some variation of it. And there are some that can come back later and create havoc or create problems. Not that it's live and active now, but somehow, well, I know how, but that's a whole nother video. There is still a small impact to your body ongoing thereafter. So, they may purposely leave that out because they thought, when I was in my 20s, I was promiscuous and I contracted this particular thing, took care of it, and they're too embarrassed here now 20 years later to bring it up. And that could be the very well underlying issue that is escaping you all now in trying to ascertain what's wrong. So you definitely want to have those discussions. You definitely want to have those discussions with the person prior to the visit, as well as, when they get there, if they forget, then you can remind them. I know people specifically would not give all their symptoms because I'll use one particular person. This person was in denial. This person intentionally would not give the doctor, and this was a doctor, a white coat doctor, all the information because he was in denial as to what he was dealing with. And I was there and able to share, a little bit more information while still preserving what bit of ego or pride or self-esteem, whatever you want to call it, but still be able to get the information conveyed so that he could get a closer to accurate diagnosis. Another thing that our patients tend to do is they may not come back and report everything that went on at the physician's office. Well, if they don't give us all the information, how can we support them? If they have gone to the physician and they've gotten a diagnosis of a particular condition, and I know this tends to be people who tend to have the cancers, don't want their family to worry, and they don't want their kids to worry, things like that. I know a lady did that. She got to her death, almost to her deathbed, and would not tell her children that she was in end-stage cancer. She was actively, somehow I stumbled on her through a third party, and I think she lived a couple months after she hung out with me, but when I stumbled upon her, or she stumbled upon me, however it worked out, I did what I could at the time and supported in as much as I could. She had actually visited my area because of a particular physician here who had a history of being able to help with her condition. And during that time I learned that she had not told her children what she was dealing with. And she has grown children, and they didn't know. And so, of course I discussed it with her, but it was still her decision. I respected her decision. I didn't agree with it, but I respected it. And I know others who've done the same thing, especially with that cancer diagnosis. They don't want the kids to worry. They don't want people to make a fret over them, etc., etc. But in the meantime, they're sitting there holding on to this, trying to deal with this by themselves, or with less than the amount of support they could use. And at the same time, had that woman's children known, I believe they would have let life, or as much of life as possible, take a back seat so that they could spend that time with her, glean whatever pearls, shower her with whatever love. People don't always not take time because they don't want to. Sometimes they don't take time because they're so busy with their lives. By the time they look up, it's only 24 hours in a day. And by the time they look up, the hours are gone. But when you know someone is facing some sort of illnesses, some sort of, I wouldn't say tragedy, but major difficulties like that, it makes it easier for you to say to your job, no, I don't care how much you're paying. I'm not staying for the overtime. I'm going to leave that money right where it is, and I'm going to go over here and I'm going to spend some time with my cousin because I know she's battling breast cancer. And although she's on top of it, or doctors say she's on top of it, she could use the support. She could use, me coming over and cheering her up a little bit. She could use me running an errand to get her medicine, whatever it may be. But when the patients don't report back everything, they lose that support. And they suffer alone and in silence. And we that are that should be part of their support system don't get a chance to do what it is we're supposed to do in those situations. And then when they don't report everything, look up, and things get so far, you're to the point of having to dial 911 or make some last emergency runs to the hospital. And at that point, things are so far, it's a runaway train. Just a basic doctor's visit is way expensive for anybody. So imagine when it gets to the point of emergency room. It's that much more expensive. Most of us don't have the funds for that. A lot of us don't even have the insurance coverage for it. So our loved one winds up suffering. And in a lot of cases, expiring. Because things that could have been resolved sooner or treated to such a point that they could live a longer, fuller life did not happen for whatever reason. And now they're at a point where it's gotten so bad so far to where correction is unaffordable, correction is not possible. Correction, I had one lady reason it out and say, and actually this particular person had an issue with cancer as well, and kept it for the longest. And when she finally did share, and of course I made all the suggestions of alternatives and things like that, and she was just using regular conventional Western medicine. She wasn't using anything alternative, any of the Eastern medicines, the non-traditional stuff, the more traditional stuff, excuse me. Finally got her to go see someone, and it took a minute, but finally got her to go. And so this particular naturopath says to her, wow, the particular form of cancer that you have is very treatable. Well, was very treatable in an earlier stage. Now it is advanced so far. The treatments that we have can probably extend your life 5 years or so. And he wasn't saying to her, I can give you more 5 years, because he said or so it's kind of a give or take. But what he was saying was, had she sought him sooner, some of the methods in his arsenal could probably have put that thing under her feet and kept it under her feet for another 15, 20, 25 years. And something else for those who don't intentionally report back everything from the providers, if you're the support person that goes with them, then have the discussion with them after the visit. How much should be disclosed? Do you, if you don't want your children to know, you don't want your parents to know what you're dealing with, okay, I will maintain your secret, I will maintain your confidentiality. And if it's something that you feel they really, really need to know, if it's could be fatal, give them a timeline. Say, look, I'm going to visit you with this back again in another 2 weeks. I'm going to see how you feel about it, because I really think you're not making a good decision. And give them time to think about it and weigh the pros and the cons. And in 2 weeks, you bring it up again. Have you discussed this with your children? Don't you think you should? Don't you? And you just give it. You don't want to hound them every day about it. But at the same time, you don't want to just let it go with their first decision. Why is all of this important? It's important because, as I said, we could be their only hope. Or you, as a support person, could be their only hope. It's important because, again, to whom much is given, much is expected. It would not come across you. It would not come into your realm of knowledge and being if you weren't supposed to act on it in some way, however big or however small. But as I tend to give real life examples, I will give a few. I've seen men, actually I can count 2 men right now who both have expired, and they expired because the people that the women that they married were not necessarily practicing the best health care for them. And you watch a person that you know be cared for in a way that's less than optimal, and you realize the spouse had a motive. The spouse did not want to maintain the relationship or wanted something other than. And so the spouse thought the best way to do it was to help them on out of here, along with all the resources, etc. I watched these 2 men decline and expire because their wives, and I believe in my heart, wanted out and use use their abilities to get them health care that was less than desirable. And at the same time, I watched their families cry and say something is wrong, it's not being treated correctly, etc. But they stood back and did nothing. They wouldn't communicate with the spouse. They went behind the spouse's back, snooping and prying and things like that. And while I think they had a duty to act, there was a way that could have been done. I think that everyone could have been served well. The spouse wanted the resources. The spouse didn't want the husbands, or the spouses wanted the resources. The family, the blood family, wanted their man, their brother or uncle, dad, whomever he was to them. They didn't want his resources. So had there been conversation, it could have been a matter of, okay, give him back to us. We'll care for him. We won't try to do you dirt. We won't try to go behind your back, all that kind of stuff. Y'all are married, yes, you take the stuff. It's, you keep it. But give him back to us. And so we'll care for him. And they didn't do that. And I know some of them live with that regret to this day that they chose not to. So that's the reason why it's important. My own marriage came under attack in sort of a similar way. In my case, as you all know, I don't necessarily stay totally with the white coats, so I do alternative medicines. And in my case, those associated with my husband when he was ill wanted resources and chose to use their abilities in his ear and their communication with him to try to convince him that I was going to be one of those wives to get him sick and keep him down and then, kill him off and take all his assets. Kind of what those other wives did to those men. They were playing at the trust thing to get him to believe that I was going to be one of those wives. And so it was a challenge, especially when you're dealing with, I hate to use the term ignorant, but, for lack of a better term, or let's say for those who are unknowing, for those who think that all healthcare comes from just pray and go to the doctor in the white coat and whatever they say do, just do. I've lived long enough and I've had enough personal experiences with my health to know that's not the answer. White coats and their prescription medicine will cure you faster than anything else. But when you have someone that's ignorant and doesn't know that, they wind up suffering. And so in the long run, my husband did have to suffer because he was listening to people who didn't know any better. And just like those other men, the other woman that I mentioned, the patients are the ones who wind up suffering. And in some cases, they're able to turn it around and get back on the right footing and gain their health back. But the patient suffers during the process. Going the legal route doesn't necessarily help the patient. Yeah, we can call whoever the appropriate state agency is to say that this person's not being cared for properly, etc., etc. But that doesn't necessarily help your loved one. Yeah, we can, and as a wife, like in my situation, I could do what? Cut off all contact, which is what the other two wives did that I know. Try to cut off all contact. That doesn't help your patient, because whether the communication with those folks is, whether they know what they're talking about or not, the bonds with them can help go a long way to sow good energy into him, to help him get better. So you want the energy, you want the bond, but you don't want the crap and the interference. Ideally, everybody would work together. It would be a round table. It would be a wife says, and I know I personally made some calls to one of the wives in the previous situation and gave some information, set and typed up specifics, step by step, some things to do. I found out later she chose not to do it. And it did bother me a bit. But I say all that to say, we have a duty, whether it's your blood relative or your spouse, you have a duty to help them through their illness, even if it means to their death. And the blood relatives and the spouses have a duty to work together. It may very well be that one is really greedy looking for resources, and the other one is looking just to get the person better, or some combination there in between. But just know that the patient is the one who suffers when one side takes an active, aggressive route to shut out the other side. Because the spouse is the legal spouse, and they can go to one extreme. Or the family is a blood family, and they can try to go to another extreme and pit the two against each other and all of that. When it's all said and done, the patient is the one that suffers. One last example, and then I'm going to shut this one down. A person very close to me, a close blood relative, was dealing with cancer, as well all these cancers. This person was dealing with cancer. And I watched this person listen to someone who was emotionally close to her, but who had no clue in the healthcare field, no background, had not experienced enough of life or anything to even guide someone through a struggle like that. The other persons who could have provided assistance and should have been providing assistance and support were shunned. The female that had her ear, had the patient's ear, had convinced the patient that her family was against her and that her family wouldn't help her. Her family only wanted, insurance money or furniture at the house or whatever they could get. And this female worked that entire thing. And honestly, when the patient finally was starting to realize what this supposed person was doing, this supposed support system was doing. The patient was so weakened, had been pushed down so low that the patient could barely fight back. And when the patient tried to take action to fight back, the alleged support system took their action to go ahead and push them on over, if you will. I mean, changing medicines, all kinds of stuff. And so that's why I say it's important that you do what? If you know someone is ill, they have an illness, you speak up, you be involved, you find out what's going on, you go to those appointments with them. And if it's someone that's married and you're the blood relative, you're not the spouse, then you communicate with the spouse on a regular basis. Don't ever take anything for granted that you know what you know, because you're not in the home with them. You don't know what they're dealing with. The last thing you want to do is try to break them up with their spouse or break the relationship, because there's so many things you don't know. But at the same time, if it's your blood relative, the spouse has a duty to communicate with you when you call, because let's say, for example, it's your sister. You grew up with your sister, so you remember when she was 10 years old, she had this particular illness. And she remembered when she was 15, she started going through these symptoms and these changes and all of that. All of that put together can help her get better, live longer, enjoy more of the life that she has. When we're fighting against each other, and oddly enough, as I hear so often, too many times, I've personally watched too many people expire, go to their grave in misery, and pretty much alone. They may have had a fake support system around them, but pretty much alone. And oftentimes it has been this fake support system who has been seeking assets, resources, insurance money, stuff, the house, the car, the book collection, the stamp collection, whatever it may be, some land, who knows, and come in and weasel their way through. All in all, work together. Blood relatives, married persons, work together for the benefit of the patient, because the patient is the one that's suffering. And if you can't work together, that's fine. Just drop a little note. Yield to the person who has the legal right, which means if they're married, blood people, friends, person that you went to school with for the last 30 years, back off, because you're not the legal spouse. But at the same time, just drop a note. Type a letter. Hey, I found this particular doctor. I was looking online and they said, let's use people with pain and inflammation, allegedly marijuana. And I say allegedly because the old marijuana, I would say yes, but this marijuana today, I don't know, supposedly has an impact. So I was looking up and they said marijuana is great if you're dealing with cataracts. Not sure if this is something you want to try, but I found 3 reputable licensed dealers in your area. I know, we didn't see eye to eye the last time we talked, but, I just want to email you this information. So give it a try and see. Let me know what you think. So you've done you've taken some action. You've done your duty. You still are in a position like you're supporting, but you're not being overly aggressive and stepping on the toes of the legal wife or husband who has, the legal rights. You never want to push them to a point of having to totally exclude you legally. By the same token, you don't want to push them to a point of leaving their spouse. If it's going to happen that way, if you're going to get them back, then you all come to agreement. Don't call in the state and allege all kinds of stuff or try to tear him down and I'm coming to get my brother back because you're not being a good wife to him, and just snatch your brother back. Or your sister or daughter, whomever it is. Work together with it. That has been heavy on my mind. I wanted to share that just because, like I said, I watched several people actually expire, and not having had the support that they needed and having had the right support in the right amount of time could have extended their lives tremendously. I buried 2 men who, one I was really close with, and the other one I had a fairly decent relationship with, who, went through similar. And like I said, in my own marriage, same foolishness. We've got to stop trying to be the one in control of our patient. Work together. The blood relatives and the married relatives work together and work in behalf of the patient. Very similar concept to 2 people married, you decide to get divorced, and you got the children in the middle. They're the ones who suffer because the 2 of y'all are fighting out your sides on whatever the case may be. Same exact situation here. Take the position of what's best for the patient. And what's best for the patient really is that y'all work together. And sadly, for the patient, they get to a point where things have gone so far to where they can't even correct it. And death is like right outside the door. And by then it's too late. So we've got to work on that. That's definitely something we've got to work on. Who cares about stuff? And for all of you who are stepping up and claiming, oh, I love my sister, and you just want to get her money that she had, or I love my brother, you just want his money, or whatever the case may be, leave that mess where it is. Leave it where it is. Focus on getting him better, helping to support him. Because those particular men that I mentioned, and actually all, and even with my husband and the 2 women that I mentioned, I could have gone that route and pushed, and oh, you just want the assets, and just made that the bigger deal. I chose not to. Because my energy was needed in pouring into the patients. That being said, digest some of this, and I bet many of you can think back on persons who have endured unnecessarily because they didn't get the right care, they didn't get care in a timely manner, or they had support systems around them that were not working in their best interests. And we turned a blind eye to it. We sat back and said, okay, well, let it happen. Instead of doing, what we can do, instead of trying to participate in the process, we turned a blind eye. That being the case, like I said, take this information. We know what I do is I share my lived experiences so that they can benefit someone else. And I hope you can take this information and let it be a benefit to you, to someone that you know, to some of your loved ones. Because it's time out for people dying or living a life that's, a stone's throw away from death. Because one family member doesn't like another. Or one family member thinks somebody's going to get over. Spouses, if they put up with them, then they're entitled to everything they get. Not a matter of them getting over. And truth be told, none of us know the full details of the marriages. I think back on those men, and then I'm going to shut it down real quick. I think back on those men. I knew a lot, especially with the one that I was close to. But I didn't know their pillow talk. I didn't know all the agreements they'd made. I didn't know all the promises that had been made between the 2 of them over the years or whatever. So it wasn't my position, I thought, to override his wife, to override his children and grandchildren, and go to the state or the legal system and try to take action in that way. Well, because he had a wife, because he had children, grandchildren, siblings still alive. All these people are still alive. And though they were complaining in the background, they did nothing. Well, I won't say nothing. They did very little. And my position was, I don't know what they agreed to. And he's in a not well state, so he can't tell me everything honestly. I don't particularly trust her, but that's not my fight. My fight is to make him as comfortable as possible. That being the case, take it for what it's worth. Do what you can. Grab another puzzle piece, stick it in there. Hopefully that's a piece to somebody's puzzle. And continue to work on getting yourself better. Continue to work on getting yourselves healed. Because again, we don't know when we're going to be called out of these suits. We don't know when things are going to get real ugly. Take care, be blessed, and until the next time.